It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Agronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that timing in time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 309. Tonight I'm joined by Emo.
Hello.
Ashkar.
Hi.
Grace.
Hello.
Kodra.
Hi.
Tam.
Hello.
And Phelan.
Hello.
How did we make it through a thing without you guys figuring out some way of heckling me?
I was distracted.
I wasn't sure I was going to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. So I have a pretty decent collection of what is now termed retro consoles. And with that, I have a decent collection of games, like, you know, most of the things I played growing up, and then various things I picked up, especially when the Super Nintendo era was going clearance. And once upon a time, I used to have this all hooked up through a complicated series of A/B switches, and it was madness. Like, I had to turn this one to this number and this one to this number to play this console. The problem is none of that is compatible with modern televisions.
Yeah.
Not in the least. And there aren't great options, or at least there aren't reasonable options. I mean, there's the Framemeister, which is the gold standard, but it's like $500-ish and has to ship from Japan and only like releases every so often. So there's a backlog usually waiting for it.
What is the Framemeister?
It is a frame upscaler and conversion system that basically is designed to play older consoles with, like, you know, AV cables or S-Video or, you know, whatever
or RF.
higher quality RF or SCART on an HDMI television. And like it is supposedly the purest possible thing that you can get. But like I said, it's $500 and there's always a waiting list to get one. There's a thing called an OSCC or OSCN, open source scan converter, I think is what it stands for. Anyway, it is also like a $300 box that is designed to convert your signal to something that can play on a modern television. Not to mention all the random cables that you have to hook it up to these things. It is a path of madness. So for a while, I have been looking at various all-in-one consoles, and I'm going to use air quotes around the word console, because like there's a bunch that have come out over the years that'll play like Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis, you know, the things that I would actually regularly want to play.
Retron 5 comes to mind.
Right, the Retron 5 is a thing that has a mixed record. It's by Hybrid. It has notoriously bad emulation in certain places. It's an emulator. So you put your console in, or your cartridge in, and it dumps a ROM on the fly, and then you play the ROM via emulation. But it
sounds really cool if it works.
It supports, first of all, it has what is argued to be one of the worst controllers ever as the default controller. Mm. For whatever reason, they decided to go with a Neo Geo Pocket Color like clicky sort of analog stick instead of a D-pad, and it's got this weird, really thick square design. It is not good. I don't think anybody argues that it's good. It supports Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Famicom / Nintendo, Super Famicom / Super Nintendo, and Genesis. And if you hook up a master-based converter, you can play Master System games on it. So like, it's a really cool idea. Like, I like the idea of having an all-in-one console that basically just lets me play these older games. In my travels, though, I kept hearing something mentioned called the Retro Freak. So I started tracking down what exactly that was. It apparently is a console much like the Retron 5, but it only ever released in Japan. you have to import it. But apparently it has its own emulators. It gets pretty regular updates. It also adds into the mix of consoles that are supported all the NEC, PC Engine, TurboGrafx consoles. So after a bunch of going back and around on this, I decided to go ahead and purchase one. Now, the cool thing that it does, and technically the Retron can do this as well, is you can insert a Japanese region game and have it automatically apply a English language patch.
Huh.
So you can buy the super cheap version of games that are the Japanese carts, and with a quickie English patch, play them in English.
Does that imply that most of these games have good English patches?
They do at this point. And a lot of times the English translations are sometimes better than the official ports.
Mm-hmm.
I feel
FF5
like
comes to mind.
Yes.
I feel like I'm a little dubious about that claim.
It was 100%
FF5's fan translation was 100% better than the first official translation it got.
No,
The first official
that
translation was garbage.
that all of the games will have good translation.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, not everything, but
There's
like,
got to be a fan base, but
but there's a lot.
But there
of
are
really,
fan translations for a lot of old games that only released in Japan.
right. Like Bahamut Lagoon, if you want to play that on the Super Nintendo, you can pick up the cartridge for like $10-15, and there's a full translation that you can play it with. So shortly after ordering this thing, it's roughly $200. Like, no matter where you get it from, it's roughly $200 to get a Retro Freak. It's a fairly small console. The actual console is this tiny piece on the back that you can slide out and just play the games off of, because every time you run one of these, you have the option of copying it to an SD card so that you don't have to grab the original cartridge anymore. And like, if you really want to, you can just pop out the actual brains of the console, and it's a little bit bigger than a CD-ROM case. And you could play with that, and hook it up, somewhere else quickly if you wanted to. It supports all direct input and X input controllers. So you can basically play any platform with any controller. It comes with an adapter that allows you to hook up like Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Famicom extension cable ones, NEC controllers. So you can play with original controllers if you want. I'm super interested in having my PlayStation 4 fight pad for various fighting games. It seems really compelling, and I hope when it does arrive, and it's coming from Japan, which means it's probably going to take a month.
State of international shipping right now.
Yeah, it's coming from. It was like Play Asia was the most reasonable place to get the premium model that comes with some of the converters. So here's hoping it arrives someday. But I was able to go, like, just out of curiosity, I was able to go onto eBay and get a assorted bundle of Super Famicom games for $50 that had Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy V, Final Fantasy VI, Dragon Quest 1, 2, 3, 5, and Chrono Trigger. So those will be the experiments on how well the fan translations work.
Chrono Trigger got released here in the same version that got released in Japan.
Yeah, it was just part of the bundle. Like, I already have Chrono Trigger, but I don't have the Dragon Quest games that I don't have. I would like to have a copy of Final Fantasy V. And I've heard there's significant differences in the fan translation of 6 and the actual one that came out here.
I'm pretty sure You Spoonie Bard is not in the fan translation.
That was 4.
4?
Oh, that was 4.
Yes.
4.
Yeah. But anyway,
it's the fan translation of the game that released here is Final Fantasy 2 wasn't great, but they did at least keep that line in all retranslations.
Yeah, I actually saw somebody who went through and did a comparison of the various translations, like line by line, between all the different options. And each one has its pluses and minuses.
it also doesn't care if it's a PAL game or a NTSC game. So it should be interesting. And also, like, mostly I just wanted something that I could play my actual cartridges on. Because, like, I have most of the Super Nintendo games that I would care to play again.
In less extreme news, I have been playing around with the Super Nintendo selection that you can get on the Switch,
which is getting to be a really good selection of games.
I mean, the NES had some great games, but the Super Nintendo had a really stacked catalog, and so it's hard to make a group of hits without it being pretty amazing. Like, you give me Link to the Past, Super Metroid, Mario World, and Yoshi's Island, and I'm pretty impressed already.
Super Nintendo had such great games. And enduring ones, too.
Yeah. And they're still just as relevant today as they were at that time. So many of them, I can just keep playing. I mean, it's fine. But then again, like 16-bit graphics was kind of, I mean, yes, the 32-bit era made prettier sprites, but they weren't so much better that it was really that noticeable. Like, yes, Symphony of the Night is a gorgeous game, but like Dracula X, which was the port of the original NEC Rondo of Blood, like that one's on SNES, and it doesn't feel that much different than Symphony of the Night.
I mean, as far as retro graphics go, pixel graphics stopped getting as much of a workout during the 32-bit era. So there's still some examples of very pretty 2D games like Symphony of the Night, but there's also a lot more early 3D games that don't hold up, let's say.
Yeah.
If you go and look at how, say, Spyro or Crash 1 look now, they don't look that great.
Bubsy.
I will say on the RG350 handheld emulator thingy that I have, the small screen size helps out a lot of those games. It looks considerably better when it's a smaller screen.
Less easy to see the pixels.
Less easy to see the pixels, because I was playing Legacy of Dragoon.
Yeah, I played that on the PSP. Similar story.
Yeah, like it's fine. It looks perfectly fine. You just can't see much. And then games like Vagrant Story, because they were already pretty high art direction, really look good on a small screen. Because like you can't quite see the rough edges that you can when you've blown it up on like a modern television.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be really weird to play Game Gear games on a television.
Oh, those are going to look awful.
They're going to look horrible.
Oh no.
Game Gear games were just Master System games with lower resolution.
Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. But there were a lot of things that came out for Game Gear that never came out for Master System.
It's true, but how many of those do you really want to play?
I don't know. I mean, admittedly, I'm
Sonic Chaos exists, and it is not a bad game, but it's not as good as any of the games that came out for the Genesis.
What was the game where you played like a man that was a group of blobs connected?
Vector Man?
Yeah.
That was a Genesis game.
Oh, that was?
Which is a weird name for what he was. He was just a blob. He wasn't vectors. Yeah, so like I remember I had this doodad for my Game Gear that bolted onto the back and let me play Master System games on it, and that looked better than playing Game Gear games on a Game Gear.
There are also some weird abominations, like the port of the Master System Sonic 2 for Game Gear is nearly unplayable because they shrunk the screen size, and therefore you can't see some of the bosses at all.
Oops.
They're off the screen when you are standing on the ground.
Oh, that's not good. That's not good at all. I remember I liked whatever the Master System Zelda clone was, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
I couldn't tell you.
And I played a game called Zillion a lot, which was sort of like Rolling Thunder. Okay, so this next topic, I don't even know how to lead into this, but like it's something we've talked about before, but it feels like it is hitting a fever pitch right now. There's a lot of disappointed fans turning toxic for various things. And most specifically, this has come up with the last two Nintendo Directs. The Nintendo Direct that was supposedly going to release something new by WayForward had a lot of hype going into it. WayForward is a company that makes really good 2D side scrollers. And that's really what they're known for. And when it had leaked that they would be releasing a new game, like the Nintendo Twitter sphere, Reddit sphere just went apeshit with various predictions on what it was going to be. And when it was a new Bakugan game, nobody was happy with that. And just the level of toxicity that I've seen from Nintendo fans over that has been extreme. And that's not usually a group I really associate with being toxic.
Wait, it isn't?
Not like it really has not compared to the MMO gamers.
I'm not sure I'd put them below the MMO gamers.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Like, I'm wondering if this is just a result of Nintendo being bad at the internet for so long.
I was going to say, like, have you? I'm thinking of like Smash players.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Smash players, Zelda fans.
Yep.
I mean, Metroid fans.
Metroid
okay, so
fans are
yeah,
super salty.
I accept your point. But then, like, I guess it was last week, they did a mini direct, and they specifically said that it was going to be third-party
games.
Yet the internet rumor mill went to town. Like, well, maybe they're going to show us off Metroid, or maybe they're going to show us off this.
None of those are third-party games.
No, they were trying really hard to set the expectation that, hey, well, like, even prior to the WayForward one, like someone at Nintendo had the prescience to notice that, oh, hey, people are raising their expectations here, and made some comment to the effect of, like, you know, to keep your expectations in check. And, like, I get it, I guess, to some extent. Like, nobody's ever asked for a Bakugan game, but
I'm sure somebody must have.
Seriously.
Yeah, I don't. What is Bakugan? That name sounds familiar.
Isn't that the is that the Tops?
Spinning Tops.
Yeah.
No, it's not Beyblade.
No, it's not Beyblade. Okay, it's the other one.
I don't know what it is then. I thought it was the top one.
It's similar.
But it is a using your little plastic toys to fight game.
Yes.
Oh, it's the ones where the things, they roll up into balls and you, like, slam them down on the table and they, like, pop up. I don't know. I see ads for these things occasionally in between my son's television shows, and I mostly just, like, I'm sure I would have thought it was the coolest thing ever when I was 10.
I'm sure I have a bunch of similar toys from when I was 10.
Look, we can't talk too much. We had Pogs.
Comments.
I missed Pogs.
Oh, man.
Like, those were a thing when I was playing Magic the Gathering.
Uh-huh. Yep.
But I did not, like, I was too old for Pogs to be a thing. Like, I kept getting them with various magazines, looking at them like, what the hell is this thing?
Yeah,
I was not too old for Pogs to be a thing.
I was also not too old.
I was the correct age when they came out.
They were everywhere.
Yeah.
I had my slammers, and I was trying to get my slamming techniques down so I could win some at school.
But, like, I can remember having all sorts of random one-off toys. Like, there was this toy line called Air Raiders, which were these little bitty tiny figures, and, like, the entirety of the gimmick is you could blow on this tube and shoot missiles. That was it. Like, that was the mechanic for this toy. Like, everything else about the toy line was kind of cool looking, but, like, mostly it's like, okay, yeah, no, we're going to market this gimmick of being able to blow on these tubes and shoot rockets. So, like, I get, you know, toys like that. But yeah, like, I don't know, like, I was shocked at just how much toxicity I was seeing pouring out of the Nintendo fandom. And it made me think, like this isn't the first time I've encountered this. There's been lots of times when announcements went south. I mean, I felt a certain amount of indignation over the Diablo Immortal announcement.
Yeah, I mean, I've had my share of disappointments at hearing game announcements, but there's a difference between me looking at something and going, oh, I guess I might not be playing that, and the level of assault and toxicity associated with some of these recent announcements.
That's so on Metacritic can downvote every single game that Shin Megami Tensei franchise.
Yeah.
That was the big one this week. I'm like, oh my god, like that took some effort. You need to go get help there. Like seriously, you need some help if you downranked everything.
I mean, somebody probably wrote up a script, but yeah.
I mean, are people that upset about Shin Megami Tensei games?
Yes,
they are. Mm-hmm. I don't know why.
Because it wasn't what they wanted.
There are a lot of people on the internet who are unable to understand that not everything is for them.
Man, I thought it was kind of cool. Like, I've never successfully made it through one of those games, but like, I might on a platform that I like better.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never actually played a mainline SMT game, but I do love Persona games.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Your opinion of those things.
Yeah, I should divorce my opinion of those things.
Yes, those things are not the same
for sure.
At all.
I have, I think, 4 on the 3DS and tried to play it, and it was okay.
4's start is so bad, though.
Yeah, it feels like you're starting in the middle of the game.
Everything I've heard is that they very much mentioned that they are going to be trying to base SMT5 off of Nocturne, the game people thought were good, and did not want you to be thinking about 4, the game people thought was bad.
4 was very good once you got to Tokyo, but its intro is awful, like irredeemably awful.
I know very little about this, but my understanding is they're trying to make people associate this upcoming game with SMT3 Nocturne.
Yes, they are, along with re-releasing SMT3 Nocturne.
But really, like, for me, the more games that get released on the Switch, the better. I will always be fine with them announcing re-releases. It's a great console. It has a really unique use case. I don't get being upset about having nice things.
Because if the nice things were not the nice things you wanted, then you have to be angry at the people who they were directed at.
Yeah. Oh, also, these nice things might not actually have Dante in these versions. Oh, no.
I would actually be surprised if the SMT3 remake didn't have Dante.
I don't know. They have Raido, who is in the Maniacs Japanese version. So people are like, "Oh my gosh, are they not going to have Dante in this version? This is awful."
Yeah, that's an edge case.
Have you seen that various sticker that ends up in memes featuring Dante from the Devil May Cry series? Nocturne is what it was originally from.
Yes.
Is it like Nintendo fans in general, or is there like some fan community that's particularly up in arms? Like, is it the Metroid community upset that there's no new Metroid?
I mean, it seems to be everyone is upset at various things. Like the Smash community was upset that it wasn't a Smash Direct announcing.
But that just happened.
The Smash community is salty that they got a character from ARMS.
I'm glad we got a character that wasn't the main character from ARMS. Anyway.
I mean, there were people salty over Terry Bogard.
Yeah, that one I don't actually understand.
I mean, there like it seems like you cannot announce anything anymore without vehemently wounding some fan base.
Yeah.
I think that it's a reflection of the overall world state. But yeah, like you hear in games all the time. It's like, oh, you can't. Not only can you not please everybody, no matter what you make, someone's going to love it, somebody's going to hate it, and somebody will be angry about it, and somebody else is just not going to care.
Well, and like it just feels like it has escalated to a whole new level. Like people have been disappointed over things for years, but like the fact that now all of these things spawn death threats, like that is not new, but it's definitely something that like has evolved over the last 2 decades.
I mean, I think there's escalation there for a lot of reasons, and some of them are very likely backlash responses to changing social conditions that some of these people are not okay with. So they're exerting control over the tiny sphere that they think they can.
Yeah, because I mean, we've seen, like, just within the past decade, like, we've seen massive reactionary backlashes of fans angry that what's being made isn't for them in video games, in science fiction, in comic books, like, and I'm pretty sure that to a great degree it's the same people, or certainly like being instigated by a lot of the same people.
Yeah,
the sad puppies and the gamergators and whatever are all basically the same people.
Yeah,
just in different fandoms.
And people from one of those groups will then coordinate with the next movement.
Yep. And grifters will come along and attach themselves to whichever one is in ascendance at the moment, and then parachute off of it and latch onto the next one.
Yeah.
It's and I don't know what can be done about it beyond, what's being done now of people, speaking up against them, and like people within like name people within the communities speaking up against these things.
Yeah, I mean, the gaming sphere has changed dramatically in the last 15 years for the better, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I play video games basically every single night. Many of my closest friends I've met through video games. I record a podcast about video games every single week, pretty much. But being a gamer hasn't been a part of my identity for a while because it just doesn't have a lot of meaning anymore. It's like making person who watches TV part of your identity. Like, everyone does that. That's not individual or unique anymore. And it was a thing that I realized and separated out my identity from. And now it's like there's specific game stuff I like. I'm a storyteller. I'm into stories. I'm into group play. I'm into cooperative experiences. But I think that there are a lot of people who haven't really accepted that things are different than they were in the late 90s or the early 2000s.
Well, and I kind of feel like there are a lot of people who deeply invested themselves in these identities and told themselves that the reason they weren't successful, that the reason that the people didn't like them, that whatever, was because of that. It was because, they just didn't understand, and but now everybody's doing these things, and yet they're still not successful and people still don't like them. So clearly it must be because other people are doing it wrong, and they have to yell about it a lot.
Yeah.
And this is why gatekeeping is dumb.
Mm-hmm.
That's why accessibility is my huge soapbox. I mean, one of the reasons.
And I think, I don't know, it gets back to how do you combat this? And the only way that I know to combat this is to be as inclusive as humanly possible and wait for it to eventually die out. And that's all I can think of. It's eventually feeling like you have ownership over the entire domain of games has to eventually peter out. And maybe the escalation that we keep seeing is the death throes of that culture. But I don't know.
I feel like that is a little optimistic for my view of it.
I think we're always going to have people who convince themselves that the reason they're not successful is that they're being prevented from being successful by the non-white, non-males who are apparently now running everything.
I also think that part of it is just a sense of entitlement and ownership over this entire space that they are.
First.
Yeah, I was here first, even if you weren't. But you've been told you were here first,
and that's the reason, because I'm such a contrarian, that I still consider gamer part of my core identity, just because I have this degree of screw all of you guys. I've been a gamer my whole life. Mm-hmm. Just because I'm not like you doesn't mean I haven't been part of this hobby just as long. And, just, I don't know. I can't quite let go of that. And it's less core to who I am now. But when it comes up in discussions like this, I feel like it's still important to say, no, not all gamers are assholes. Not all gamers are the kind of people who are going to turn toxic when an announcement wasn't about the game they wanted it to be about.
Yeah.
Some of us have been here all along and just like to enjoy fun times in video games. Kill internet dragons with friends.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've been being disappointed that the game that I want, isn't going to be made for like over 30 years now. So I don't know. Maybe just get over it.
I have been disappointed since Christmas of 1992.
God, what happened in Christmas of 92?
That's when Commander Keen 7 came out.
Oh.
It was at the end of Commander Keen 6. They put a message that they were looking forward to us playing their new game in December of 92.
Yep.
Yeah, I do wonder if a new mainline Keen game is eventually in the works, since they've pulled the mobile game.
I still have that trailer, and that trailer was pretty great.
It was.
That's more Keen development than we'd had in the past decade, so I don't know.
Yeah, I was all for the changes that they had made in the storyline. I was super down with playing as the Keen kids.
I think that looks like a delightful children's Saturday morning cartoon, and I wish they would make that. But they don't really make. I mean, they make Saturday morning cartoons. It's just you don't watch them on Saturday mornings.
I know, that is a big disappointment for me. Just this is one of those things, along with the death of arcades, that I will forever miss. But I understand why it's not viable anymore. I miss the Saturday morning cartoon block, but I realize cable television is a thing that happened, and there are entire channels full of cartoons every day.
Oh yeah, there are. Let me tell you.
Speaking of which, just random aside, apparently you were correct, Kodra, from the other day when we were talking about it, and all the Steven universes are on HBO Max.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
I think that's where basically all the Cartoon Network stuff has gone.
Was
regular show
you,
and Gumball.
I thought it was Kodra, but
it was me. Yeah, because regular show's all there, Gumball's all there. I think that's just where all of it. Yeah, which I guess there's more of that coming.
Yes, We Bear Bears is a delightful show.
It's just
but I mean, back to loop around a second. I'm kind of with you, Grace. There's part of me that wants to plant a flag in the ground and say, no, I'm not going to back away from this, what was a part of me my entire life, and not willing to surrender it just to the assholes. But
yeah, I can't let go. And, like Tim said, I play video games pretty much every day. I used to have a blog about them. I'm on this podcast about them. That actually is a pretty big part of my existence, even if it's not necessarily central to my identity itself. It's a pretty big part of my life.
And maybe that's, part of it is we're able to have this thing be important to our life without making it core to who we think we are. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the only thing in my life. It's far from the only thing in my life.
I mean, and the other piece of it is, I've been doing this for a while. I played a lot of games, A game has to be real different and stand out real hard for me to be like, oh, that's something I've never seen before. I welcome the like, this is totally different. This is crazy. This is completely like completely nuts. Because it's like, hey, maybe it's something maybe it'll be something I've never seen before.
Well, you can hear that just in the way that we talk about games, because it is very rare that we ever talk about a game title without referencing a half dozen other titles. Like it's always somehow like this or like this or like this.
It's the Dark Souls of Pokemon.
You hurt me deeply.
Ooblets is the Dark Souls of Pokemon.
Oh. Well, I mean,
you couldn't have a more wrong statement ever.
Isn't this also true of most like mediums?
Yeah. I mean, because you see it with movies or television or books or whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe it's lack of maturity that like, I don't know, like, I mean, games critique is still very young, it feels, and maybe they've not gotten to a point of being able to talk about something without, shoehorning it into good or bad.
So games production does not have the level of like academic rigor necessary that like television. Television floundered and had all kinds of crazy things that tried and failed for like decades until there was enough scholarly like discussion about it that that you could make winning formula for television shows. Like people understood episodic structure. People understood how to structure an episode, how to make how to make money with it, with the commercial breaks at the right time, how to do your scripting. Like, yeah, it sounds like it's all how the sausage is made stuff, and it takes sort of the romance out of it. But it's also how you end up with successful TV shows. And once there's a formula for a successful TV show, once we know how to do it, it's a lot easier to do it again. And I mean, it was like a thing I saw recently where people were talking about, like, why is it that indie games have all of these new crazy ideas, and it's the AAA games that are like breaking crazy ground in like bubble wrap simulation? Why does The Last of Us 2 have this absolutely ludicrously detailed rope thing for no reason? It's not important to the game, but like it's got crazy rope physics for some reason. And the reason is that if you have a game where with like a combat system and mechanics and an engine and a design that's comfortable and that everyone knows, that's when you can spend all of your extra cycles making all of this other stuff really impressive versus just desperately trying to make it work. And
I would think it's probably also the sign of a mature engine when you can actually spend time to, do those nuanced things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and an engine is sort of overused as I could go on a whole rant about what engine means in a game dev context. But like a team that knows how to use the tools that it's got is going to make...
I'm mostly using engine as a generic term for the tools that are used for that game.
Yeah.
Not the actual Unreal Engine or whatever.
But yeah, that's why there's so many sequels that are doing more interesting stuff.
And I remember seeing this with Quake 3 baseline games, that they kept getting more and more and more interesting in what they were doing with that formula, because like a lot of games were built on that structure. I mean, that was licensed out to a bunch of people, and it basically like came with all of the stuff you needed to build your game. You just fill it with assets. And towards the end of the Quake 3 engine, there were a lot of really cool things happening as people kept trying to push what it could do. And I think it's the same is true with like every console generation. The games that come out at the end of a console generation just are unrecognizable from the games that came out as launch titles.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, compare Super Mario Brothers to Super Mario Brothers 3. Those are on the same system.
Yeah, and even if you take the custom chips that were in Super Mario 3 out of the equation, there's a lot of optimization that was happening there. Okay, Tam, I'm not sure where we're going with this next topic, but tell me about making our own goals.
Oh, man. So, this has come up in a bunch of different contexts repeatedly over the last few weeks as we've pushed this topic out, which is very interesting to me. It came up because of Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2, it is really easy in Guild Wars 2 to get lost and not really know, and feel like you're just wandering and not doing anything meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
It does not help that the game's initial structure basically forces you to do this. They don't show you any of that other stuff you could be doing.
Yeah. And if you know where to look, there's an absolute wealth of interesting things you can be doing with great rewards. But you have to like pick one or pick a few of them and go do it. And like decide what it is you want to do. And this is something I've been thinking about in a number of different games where I love doing this, especially in like a big open world MMO style of game. I'm also noticing that I really, really love it in Ghosts of Tsushima. And it's a thing that it's super lacking for me in other games where I don't feel like I can choose my own goals from a number of things. It's like, I'm going to do this thing. And like one of the frustrations I've had with like Destiny and like PSO2 and even FF14 is I like to hop in a game and pursue a goal that's meaningful at my own pace. And games that let me do that, love it. I'm super invested. And
I
games
feel like
that don't.
There's a caveat here. Pursue a goal that is not just farming for something.
Right. Well, that's why I say I have to feel like I can go and do meaningful things that are directed. It's not just like, oh, hey, go do stuff until you get a drop. Like, I hate that because it's not directed. It's like, I guess I'll just wander around hoping. This could take 30 seconds or it could take 17 hours.
So what if it is go do this thing in this one place and this is the one place where this thing could drop?
I like that better because at least it's a place I can specifically go.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as I'm not spending too much time there, commensurate with the reward I'm getting and the effort involved, that's fine. And Guild Wars 2 does this a lot. It's hey, go get a drop from these bats. Just find some bats somewhere in the world and get a drop from them.
And usually when it's something like that, where it's not a guaranteed drop, like there's a lot of things that you can kill for it, and they're relatively easy fights.
Yeah, and
like if it sends you after a champion or a legendary for something, it's going to be a guaranteed drop.
Yeah, and so the chances of me getting the thing that I want are commensurate with the effort it takes to get them. And that feels really good, especially because it usually doesn't take a whole lot of time to get them. But I'm always working towards something, and I'm making like visible incremental progress always.
So what you are describing is I'm very familiar with in Guild Wars. I'm much more familiar with this in Warframe, where Warframe I log in and I'm like, what am I doing in this game? I have no idea what I was supposed to be doing. Okay, now, like, when I'm in a stride in Warframe, it's because I have set myself a plan of a series of goals I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah.
I also do this I did this in a big way in Monster Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, here is a goal.
I want this armor set.
Yeah. Guild Wars Guild Wars 2, like, currently my goal is see the story, and that's a pretty easy goal to follow. One of the things that I really have a struggle with is most of the grinds, like, I don't quite get what I'm getting at the end. Like, I'm less motivated by... I am generally a little bit less motivated by cool-looking items. Like, I will say, oh yeah, I got this cool-looking thing, but it's not, like, something that generally motivates me to a huge amount of work to chase after it.
Yeah.
Which is really what you're getting in most of your chases in Guild Wars 2. There are a couple, like Skyscale I'm really excited about, because Skyscale is a completely different mount, and I know that's a pretty big grind, so I'm looking forward to working on that. But like most of the legendary items I'm less excited about. Like the Ascended item, trying to get an Ascended set of gear, I'm more excited about.
Yeah. And, honestly, like, I did a legendary, but I'm probably not going to do another one. I'm glad I did it because in the process of doing it, I did a whole bunch of other cool stuff, and, like, that was fun.
Yeah, this is sort of Guild Wars 2's... The challenge I feel with this game is the fact that they are so hard locked against any more vertical progression. I kind of am like, I feel like I'm looking for some amount of something that lets me know, yes, I did this thing and this was the benefit I got for this thing that I did.
Oh, see, that's the thing that keeps me in it, is that I'm not doing this constant. I realized recently how done I am with gear treadmills and how totally unmotivated by them I am at this point.
Yeah.
And like
that's part of the problem I have, is like I feel like nothing I get in the world is sufficiently better than anything I already had.
See, and I come at it from the other end where I feel like, okay, I got this thing and it's going to be relevant forever.
Yeah.
So
it's a super good
I put some work into it, but that's okay because now I have it, and it's never going to get it's not going to get replaced. I'm not going to be forced to replace it. If I replace it, it will be because I did something to get something else that I want to use.
I think I would agree with you. I'm done with gear treadmills. One of the things that I was just thinking about while I was comparing them is one of the reasons why I will get on my grindy path in Warframe is because I am trying to level up my is it mastery rank?
Yes.
And that is something that is like do everything in the game, do all of the things, and once you've done all of the things, there is a vertical path that is not like game breakingly relevant, but it's still there.
That's how I feel about mastery rank in Guild Wars 2, actually. That's the vertical progression feeling for me.
Well, so I would definitely agree with you. Like, I am definitely still like doing stuff that gets me XP because I want mastery ranks, but those are also, I mean, eventually those run out, and then you have achievement ranks, and then achievement ranks feel a little less significant.
It feels like master ranks in Guild Wars 2 aren't actual power.
No.
Some of them are definitely power.
They're totally power.
Yeah. Huge change.
So one of the things that is important to also realize is mobility is power in this game.
Yes.
And
they're all mobility.
They're not all mobility, but a lot of them are mobility. And the ones that aren't mobility are either opening up new options to you or a couple of other things. Like, actually, the stuff that gets me really excited is all of the stuff that I know I'm not rich enough to get, like the fractal permanent account boosts, which I guess you do get those from doing achievement rank. So I guess just keep doing achievements.
Yep.
Achievement, and that's the thing is that, like, achievement score is not all that relevant But the stuff you're doing to get that score can be super relevant.
Yeah, like people talk about that Guild Wars doesn't have a quest system. It does. They're achievements. That's what so many achievements are. Yeah, collection achievements. They are quests.
So Guild Wars has a quest system. It's just nobody knows it exists, and they don't tell you it exists.
They are very explicit about that it exists now.
Oh, are they?
Their new player onboarding.
Their new player onboarding system uses it now.
Yes.
Yeah, their new player onboarding pushes you straight to collections and emphasizes them hugely.
Yeah, they make a point of here's a collection to complete, and once you complete this collection, here are some rewards for you. Here
are gear upgrades for you based on completing collections.
That's very funny. I am not a new player who has been onboarded, and I haven't really dived into collections yet.
I mean, collections are basically everything that you could get from a quest, from cosmetic gear to, hey, this was an interesting challenge, to mastery points, which are always nice to have, to ascended gear. There's tons of ascended gear.
There's non-cosmetic gear in that too.
There's a lot of, I mean, I just finished a collection today for an ascended sword.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was going to say, speaking of, you've completed Heart of Thorns at this point, right?
Yeah.
You should start the collection. You should start the series of collections to reforge Calidbolg.
I should.
Because they are, there's a little bit of interesting story there. They're relatively straightforward, and at the end you get your pick of one of 5 ascended weapon types.
Oh, it doesn't have to be a greatsword?
No.
Nope.
And once per day, you can turn it into one of the others of those weapon types if you feel like it.
Ooh.
So it is an ascended weapon that you can change up anytime you want to for a mild cost.
It's like a mini legendary.
Yeah.
Is it stat selectable too?
Yes. It is stat selectable when you first get it, and then when you turn it into something else, well, you're going to have to select those stats again. So,
that's super rad. I definitely should do that. Maybe I'll go do that right now.
But it's a couple of collections, a couple of small instances, and yeah. But like that's what a quest is in Guild Wars 2, is that sort of thing.
And that's one of the things that goes into the like making my own goals part, is every so often I'll be doing something and it gives you a little like collections pop up whenever you get another thing in a collection. And if you click on that pop up, it jumps you straight to that collection. So you can see what other things do you need for this.
And what will you get when you complete it?
And what will you get when you complete it? And one of the things that I've started doing, because I'm starting to go a little bit off the beaten path versus beelining the story like I was before. And like something will drop, or like what frequently happens is if you bind a weapon, like if you soul bind a weapon or account bind a weapon, if that weapon is part of a collection, it'll unlock that collection or progress the collection. And so I'll see a pop-up and I'll be like, wow, this random sword drop I got, that the sword drop wasn't that important. But when I broke it down, it popped up a collection. Oh, this collection gets me an armor set I really want, or a stat selectable piece of armor, or, something I didn't have. And like, now I'm down a rabbit hole, which is really, really satisfying. And so much of it is predicated on my ability to hop in and just play in a way that is more self-directed versus knowing that knowing that there's only very specific places for me to go that are relevant to me.
Yeah, because that's the other thing, is Guild Wars 2 does an even better job than Final Fantasy 14 does of making all the zones relevant. Like, you are always going back to earlier zones.
Via bribery. So the same way, just even more.
Which sounds like a good segue into the bribery talk.
I mean, that's where it came from.
Yeah, I mean, I've never actually... I think this is the only MMO that I've played where a new player can start the game. I can go to the newbie zone and play alongside that person with my decked out character and have it be an interesting experience for them, a reasonably interesting experience for me, and we both get rewarded relevant in a way that's relevant to us.
In what sense? Like
I'm going to get level 80. I get level 80 gear drops.
Oh, yeah.
Which get me, crafting mats and similar things that I care about.
You still get level 80 gear drops. You get zone bonus rewards, which vary depending on the week, from not that useful to maybe it's worth your time to be in a low-level zone this week. You still get level appropriate to your current level XP and karma rewards from events, sadly not from hearts. There's a bunch of reasons to be in a low-level zone. In addition, the fact that the daily system encourages people to be in one of the normal zones basically every day keeps them all somewhat active.
And a lot of zones have some unique thing about them, which is really useful. But any given thing, I don't think there's any given thing in the game that you can't get 5 or 6 different ways. Outside of like stuff like the Sky Scale, where it's a particular quest line. But like if I need an ascended sword with a certain stat package, there's a couple of ways I can go about getting that. And so I can choose the one that's most fun for me. And it's kind of the joy of the like massively horizontal progression that they have, that it means it's like, oh, do I not really want to log in and grind dungeons? I don't have to, but I can still do things that get me closer to what I actually want and why I'm grinding the dungeon in the first place, which is a new sword. And a lot of times it's like, go back to some older zones because that's got the thing I want.
Yep.
It honestly doesn't even feel like bribery to me. It's just I go to where the stuff I care about is, and the stuff I care about is everywhere.
There's also a number of different zones that are just generally going to be active because there's a bunch of different reasons to be there. One of the things I'm discovering is Dragtop is almost always active because people care about a specific material that you can only get a limited quantity per day of.
Yep, and that's one of the places you can get it.
And
But you can only get the full amount there if the map if enough events have been done in the map within the past little bit.
And by full amount, like there is 19 available quartz in that zone, and 10 of it is locked behind doing events.
And specifically is locked behind enough people having done events in the zone. Not you specifically doing events. But so you can show up and pitch in, or you can, roll the dice and just show up and hope that the zone's already advanced enough.
Yeah, I hope that somebody else did the work.
But
I vaguely remember, like, you got decent rewards from just doing the events.
That too. Like, that's the other thing is those events...
You get a different resource from doing those events.
Uh-huh.
And that can be a somewhat lucrative resource.
Yep. There are some crafting materials only purchasable with that resource. And the price of those resources is dependent on how many events were done in the zone recently. And the things that you can craft with those resources are in demand. One in particular is required for the Sky Scale. Lots of people want their Sky Scale.
And one of the big challenge that I have is, like, it seems like I really need to get through the various storylines, and that I'm being held back by not having completed some of the various storylines. And I don't really love the various storylines.
I mean, you could honestly...
The thing you can do, and I think I honestly recommend doing, is skipping ahead.
Yep. I mean, I can synopsize what happened in the initial storyline. You can't even do the season 1 story anymore.
Yep.
And I could not synopsize what happened in there other than you meet some awesome people.
Well, I just mean like Heart of Thorns. I've never made it through the Heart of Thorns story.
Oh, I think the Heart of Thorns story actually gets decent. And I found it was a lot shorter once I started dedicating myself to it.
I do think that I did find it to be kind of a slog, whereas I absolutely loved the Path of Fire storyline start to finish.
Yeah, season 3 is where they really hit their stride on storytelling.
Yeah, season 3 has been really fun so far.
Yeah, I was commenting to another friend of ours earlier today, actually, that it's really interesting to follow the game, because I feel like when the game first came out, I would absolutely not have seriously compared it to Final Fantasy XIV in terms of storytelling. Like, that would be laughable, because the story is just nowhere near as good, and FF14's was way, way better. And like, at this point, some of the storytelling they do is every bit as good. Like, Final Fantasy XIV has higher highs, but on average, the storytelling is just as good. And the things you are doing in the story missions are way more engaging. And I think it's really interesting to see it all unfold, as well as like how far it's come in the time it's been in development.
I mean, when this game came out, wasn't Final Fantasy XIV like being dismantled?
Yes. Or actually, I'm not sure that it happened yet. It certainly hadn't relaunched. Like, ARR hadn't happened yet.
I mean, I think that Final Fantasy XIV, they're definitely figuring out how to tell a story much better. The gameplay is a lot more engaging. It's kind of the one thing that keeps me away from Final Fantasy XIV, is I'm not really looking forward to more traditional MMO hotbar combat. That's one of the things that I think is what caused me to break from this game early on. Is I was trying to treat it like a traditional MMO with hotbar combat, and it is an MMO, and it does have a hotbar from which you do combat.
But it's not. The combat feels much more action RPG.
Well, and it is allowed to be a lot more action RPG by dint of the ways enemies work. And that's one of those things that's not like immediately apparent, but like you learn real quick in World of Warcraft that the way you fight a mob is you stand still and you attack it, and you don't move unless you have to. And I had that pretty well ingrained into me.
Yeah, and that sure won't work in Guild Wars.
No.
Oh, no.
If anything, you should be moving whenever possible and only stand still when required.
Yeah, like, you see somebody winding up for a big hit, rather than press an active defense, why don't you just try and move out the way? They aren't going to...
active defense does something.
I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, in WoW, the enemy would, like, sort of hover over to you so that their attack's still connected, but that doesn't happen in Guild Wars 2.
It's actually a sharp break from the original Guild Wars as well, where if you were moving, any attacks in the back were automatic critical hits.
That was very... Well, in WoW...
It's in WoW, too.
They were dazes.
You get dazed.
Yeah, it's just like, this is the way that you played MMOs, and I don't know, it felt like Guild Wars... This is always a challenge, because no game really wants to be, like, communicating directly to another game, but I feel like they needed to communicate to their audience that things had changed somehow.
Or more successfully than they did.
Mm-hmm.
Because they sure did that thing, but, like... crowing about how they are the un-MMO, 90s throwback aside, is not really an effective way to tell you what you actually are.
Yeah. Or how your game is supposed to be played.
Yeah.
We're talking a lot about Guild Wars 2 in this. One of the things that I know I wanted to talk about is, again, sort of how zones work in this game is... We talked about Dry Top, where in order to be able to gain access to those resources, you need people doing the work early on. And basically, a lot of these zones, there is a rhythm to them, where you have a big event that you take part in, and then you have the downtime where everyone gets to set up for the next big event. And one of the things is, like, these zones are not always going to be populated. Like, they do try and keep them somewhat populated, but they're not always going to be populated with people. But if you have a meta that you want to do, like a big zone-wide event you want to do, I have found pretty decent success in making it happen by mostly like doing work and then inviting people to come to my instance to do work to get that event set up. Because it turns out if you set up an event so that people don't have to do the pre-work to get access to the meta, a lot of people will show up because they want to get easy access to the meta.
Well, and I mean, even other stuff that I've been doing, like bounties, I'm just like, hey, bounty on me. And I am amazed that this doesn't get abused. But as a player, you can mark yourself to show up on the map for everybody in the zone.
Is that something you can do without spending a ludicrous amount of money?
Yes. You probably even have it already.
Yeah.
Interesting.
You can get the Apple tag, the mentor tag, from Mastery Points. It's part of the Pack Commander line.
Oh.
If you want any of the other tags, then yes, you have to spend quite a lot of gold.
Yeah, like, I did not realize that I could put the Apple tag on me. I actually think that's really a cool thing because it lets people who are confident in like the mechanics act as leaders in the world.
I mean,
yes.
I don't feel confident about mechanics, but it lets me put a little icon on the map that says, "Hey, a thing
something is happening here."
Yeah,
and a lot of times people like. I'll also shout out what it is, but I think also people will they see a tag on the map and they're like, hey, a thing is happening over there. Let's go see what it is.
Since you have to manually turn the thing on, that's probably something that I might care about. So let's go check it out. And it's really, really interesting. Like I've started using mine to be, because I'm like hunting bounties, and the bounties are, Thalen and I discovered that these are not doable.
No.
We got absolutely flattened. Even when we got 3 of us, we still got pretty wrecked. But if I put a tag up and I'm like, hey, found a bounty, would love some help, come to Apple, people do.
Because you're getting rewards from the bounty just because it's a bounty. And lots of bounties are required for specific collections. And so there's always people, looking for those. And then also, again, the dailies that we're talking about, one of the possible dailies is kill a bounty in one of the desert zones, which, funnily enough, one of the dailies today is do a bounty in Domain of Vavi, which is where Tam and I were doing that bounty last night.
Yeah, this week we did the Tangled Depths meta, and it was a pretty well populated map, but there was a couple of people. I think there was a commander per lane, I want to say. And we were in a group, and the person who put on the commander tag, again, this is the one you have to pay for, like, they were there, like, giving us explicit instructions on, like, here's how you're going to do this. Here's the steps of this fight. Here's what you're expected to do. He was sending out raid messages over the group so that we would be able to time our attacks and coordinate.
Yeah, and it's great to be able to. It makes the going into a zone and seeing other players actually a positive, which that's that bribery thing that I've only sometimes seen work, is like, can you make it not just neutral but good to roll into a zone and see a bunch of players?
Yes. Like, it is unequivocally positive for a zone to be populated in Guild Wars 2.
Like, I'm legitimately never ever sad to get into a zone and be like, oh wow, there's like 300 people here.
And one part of that is that I gather there is a bit of a tag system in that you have to have done some percentage of damage to get credit, but mostly there's not tagging on creatures. Like, if you need to kill a thing, you just pitch in on killing it, and you'll get credit. There's also not shared. There's also resource gathering. There's no competition for that. Like this isn't like WoW where if you mine that thorium node, I don't get it.
Yeah, there's none of like the drama mechanics.
I mean, there are plenty of drama mechanics. They're just not related to seeing other players in zones.
Yes.
What do you mean? I'm curious what you're thinking of the drama mechanics.
A lot of them relate to, at least I'm thinking of, the more complicated metas where it's possible to have things go very wrong.
Yeah.
Like where somebody can screw up and then there's a big like wipe or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's fair. One of the big things that we were stressed when we were doing that fight is to not use CC.
Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty mild example. I mean, there are metas where like people could like entirely derail the meta by like not understanding what they need to be doing. Like I'm thinking of, Tocatl, if there's only 6 turrets, and if all 6 turrets get grabbed by people that don't get what they're supposed to be doing with those turrets, you're going to have a real sad time.
But those tend to be relatively rare, which I think is good.
That's the thing. I've not seen this happen. It could technically happen. I haven't seen it happen. Mostly, I see turrets like standing empty because everybody wants to like get in and fight with their real abilities. Like, okay, I'll take a turret. It's safe here.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I often find. I haven't really done pickup groups for fractals or raids, and I'm not terribly interested in doing that because I can afford to just do those for fun with my friends, which is exactly how I want to experience them. Versus I have to go in here to get gear. But the thing that I think is really cool about a lot of the like big zone stuff with lots and lots of players is that they tend to be pretty good, especially like as time has gone on, about making those zones. It's really, really hard it's basically impossible to grief them.
Yes, for anything designed after the game originally came out.
Yeah,
basically.
Like anything out of the initial game. Like I've gone through a lot of zone metas, and I legitimately don't know how you would grief them.
I mean, one thing they've done a good job is in later metas, the like special vehicles or turrets or things are much more optional. Like they make the fight easier, but you're not just going to lose if people aren't using them properly.
Yeah. Yeah, they've gotten better at designing them. And like, sure, could I grief a zone meta if I got 50 of my closest friends to all do it? Probably. Like
maybe.
Even
if depends on the zone.
Right, it depends on the zone, but it's like if you all rolled up and scaled the hell out of an encounter and then just stood around, that could do it. Maybe.
I mean, that sounds like how the Inquis goal normally goes.
Yeah.
Fair. But it's surprisingly difficult to grief people, which means that I'm way more likely, going back to the bribery thing, basically going back to everything we were talking about, I'm way more likely to jump into something that I'm unfamiliar with.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that my incompetence is really unlikely to cause problems for people.
Yeah.
I will say, like, one of the times that I was enjoying the game the most was when I had Taco installed and would just roll into whatever zone had an event up.
Yeah.
Whatever zone it told me the event was up in, that's where I was going.
Just go into events. Do you know what the event is? I don't know what the event is. There's been a bunch of events where it's like, I have no idea what's going on.
Like, there's probably going to be a big thing, and we probably need to beat on it. Beyond that, I'll pick it up as I go along.
I mean, I did Tocatl, I did a bunch of other dragons.
One of the things when I was working on the precursor for a legendary I am considering making, but probably never will, one of the steps it has you do is collect pieces from a bunch of different dragon minions. And like, I'd never done the Mordred Vine Wrath before, but whatever. Show up to this zone, hang around for a while, see how it works.
And it's hard for me to really like adequately describe how good the feeling of I can hop in and try a thing out, and I'm really unlikely to have somebody just like go off on me for not knowing something that everybody's known for years or whatever. Like, it mostly just doesn't happen. The worst I see is people who die in an event and then sit around waiting for somebody else to res them rather than resing and running back.
Yeah.
And like, I can figure out why that would be a bad thing. That's not like super complicated.
And even then, like, mostly people aren't calling them out on it or anything or yelling at them. Like, they still get rezzed eventually.
Sometimes after the event is over.
Yes. Often with, some eye rolling, but, whatever.
I try and use my function gyro to bring them up whenever I can.
Well, at this point, we have probably reached our normal recording time. Any final thoughts about anything we've talked about tonight?
We didn't talk about it, but you should consider playing Crosscode.
We talked about that last week.
Crosscode. Is that out now?
It was out on consoles when I talked about it last week.
Okay.
Yeah, it's also part of Xbox Game Pass if you've got access to Xbox Game Pass. Xbox Game Pass is a phenomenal deal. It really is.
Crosscode devs should hire Ash for their marketing campaign.
Ash would really like you to play Crosscode.
It's a good game.
I might pick it up for Switch and start playing it. See if I can get further in it this time.
Well, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See you.